Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I would like to thank the CTO for inviting us. It's a very special and privileged affair for me to be speaking with you today because I started my career in serving the Commonwealth. And now I'm sat at Protection Group International, which is a British digital risk company, and we're focused on cybersecurity and capability development. We've worked with more than 50 countries around the world, helping them build their cybersecurity capability and manage their digital risk. We have a very strong focus on human aspects of digital risk and security, and we're a training provider with 30+ specialist courses. I've spent some significant time thinking how I can leave you with a message in 5 minutes that would inform your debate today and shape some of your thinking. And the first thing that I wanted to do is talk about national cybersecurity capacity. It's important to talk about this because I think the term capacity building gets bounded around in all shapes and sizes very often. But for the content of today's discussion, we should think of capacity building as national investments in capability to address digital risk at all levels. And I was really happy to hear Bevo just now in his presentation talk exactly about that, about national investments in capacity development. So of course, when we think about cybersecurity, there's capacity and capability that is required. That looks at national strategic vision, which should be informed by national level risks and current maturity, capability that looks at effectively investing in the criminal justice system to process electronic evidence, capability of the education sector to effectively deliver a sustainable stream of human resource to implement or maintain that strategic vision. There is also capability that looks at securing infrastructure, capability that looks to create and enforce standards across industry for cybersecurity, capability that enables information sharing and effective incident response. And as you can imagine, the list will go on. So for the benefit of today's audience, I would like to focus on people. And perhaps here, I should say that I'm not an HR professional, I'm a cybersecurity professional. So I just wanted to make that qualifier there. So how does an organization, enterprise, or even a nation state go from ground zero to building a skilled and sustainable workforce that enables an organization or an administration to address digital risk? And I thought about a couple of steps that I think would be practical and helpful for you today. So I think step one is really important to establish your priorities. And typically your priorities are informed by the kind of assets an entity or a jurisdiction in question has in its portfolio. So what level of risk are you willing to tolerate, and which of these assets are absolutely uncompromisable to cyber attack? So now you understand the critical points that you need to protect. Step two, understanding your risk. So constantly reviewing systematically and methodologically, understanding your landscape, understanding the level of risk and threat, coupled with the knowledge of your assets that you've already undertaken in step one. Understanding the threats you care about, the ones that you don't think are so significant to your portfolio, and the level of risk assigned to each of these enables the entity in question to understand what an organization's workforce needs to look like. Step three, so understanding job roles. So there's a lot of confusion as to the demands of cybersecurity skills that are required. There are many different job roles, each with its specific set of requirements and sophistication of training. Sometimes this is overwhelming. The requirement to have a combination of these job roles is entirely driven by your risk register and the assets to hand, and they all have different associated costs and required in different volumes. So some of these job roles could be cybersecurity policy and audit specialists, incident responders, SOC and threat intelligence analysts, digital forensics. Similarly, the list goes on. The good news is there are internationally recognized workforce frameworks, such as those provided by CSEC and NEST, which set out the roles and levels. You just need to work out which ones you need. Step 4, this is the interesting bit. So you've mapped it, you've understood what it is that you're trying to do, you have an understanding of where do you want to go. How do you train them? So this question, unfortunately, is entirely driven by budgets, but also driven by staff enthusiasm to learn and perhaps an HR vision. Approaches can range from self-study or learning on the job to classroom-based training. There are, of course, incredibly suitable international providers who can provide training for any task or role. These are typically high costs, but a cost that is justified on certain occasions. It just depends on the volume of people you're trying to train. There is also a second option, and I think I want to go back to something that Secretary General said earlier today about creating local capital, and something that also a point Bevel just made in his previous presentation about creating the local skill. There is this option to own the training provision entirely. So you could create a trainer program that enables an organization to continuously draw on this growing pool of qualified people to train future cohorts, advancing skills of an organization from relatively ground zero to senior members of staff. And this is the element of sustainability that I think is incredibly important, and we often don't focus on. I think I'm going to leave you with like 2 reflective points, and these refer to staff retention in cybersecurity roles. Often cybersecurity training and qualifications suggest a very expensive cost, and organizations that invest in cybersecurity professionals from a public sector often see migration into the private sector. So the first point is, I think it's important to really develop and draw career development paths in an organization so that as an individual, you can see and understand how your training, applicable on the day job as much as possible because it becomes practical, enables him or her to climb to the next level of their career trajectory, thus enabling them to do more sophisticated jobs and remunerated accordingly for the more sophisticated job responsibilities. The workforce frameworks I mentioned earlier are very helpful here. And the second point is, when highly trained individuals do move into the private sector after completing high-level sophisticated training and garnering significant experience, this perhaps should not be looked at a loss of the entity. I would go as far to say that actually it is a win for the nation state, because so long as that individual forms parts of the national ecosystem, that individual will undoubtedly contribute to managing digital risk in their own capacity from within the private sector. And if you've got your talent pool correct, there are more talented individuals longing to be promoted into the role for which they can be prepared throughout their career, which the more senior people have just vacated. I think I can talk about sustainability of capacity building, and I can talk about digital skills for a significant amount of time, but I'm conscious that I have been asked to stick to 5 minutes. So I look forward to the Q&A, and I will hand over to yourself, Juma. Thank you so much for the floor.
Thank you very much, Lara.